Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. So today we're going to the workshop is on the Triangle of Self-Obsession, and we have Risa W. and Sharon K. who will be sharing their experience, strength, and hope, and we're going to start with Risa.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I'm Risa. I'm a recovering addict.
Hi, Risa.
I just want to say first that I'm really happy to be here today, and that this is a lot more people than all the other workshops I've been to. I'm starting to feel a little bit more nervous. She walked over here with the recordings. I don't know if it's just a recording, but now I have the sound in my ear. I'm like, okay, just breathe. It's just another meeting. That's all this is. So I want to say thank you to GRCNA and to everybody who tried to put, who put this together. I'm really grateful for this convention. I'm really grateful to be here. I see so many people that I haven't seen for so long and who have such a big place in my heart and in the story of my recovery. And so I'm really happy because it seems like no matter where I go, I never feel alone. So Shelley said that the topic is the Triangle of Self-Obsession, and I was sharing with another addict that I did not read this little IP until I had like 4 years clean, because it definitely had nothing to do with me. I was like, I know what a triangle is, but I'm certainly not self-obsessed. And I really, honestly, I think that I just would I don't know, I guess nobody shared on it at a meeting I was at or something, or maybe I just walked out of one, or maybe they shared something kind of stealth, like parts of it. Because when I read it, I felt like I was reading my story. I felt this incredible shock of connection, of that sense of identification. But there were some things that were just completely new to me. I realized that the way that I had been living in resentment, anger, and fear was something I couldn't even talk about until I had 4 years clean. I didn't even know about all that stuff. So I wanted to read a couple of things from the IP. And so the first one is kind of at the bottom. It says, as addicts, we never seem to outgrow the self-centeredness of the child. And then another line that really spoke out to me was, we reach a point where contentment and fulfillment are impossible. And the last part, I think the part that might be the most famous line from this IP, we must grow up or die. When I was thinking about what to do about this thing, I thought about flow charts, like resentment, anger, fear, acceptance, love. It's got the little chart on the back. I was like, I'll draw some Venn diagrams. And that's really it's not really the NA way. It's really more about just getting up and saying what you feel. But those 3 lines spoke to me. And what I thought that I would do is that I would tell you the story of how I grew up in NA. I got clean on October 15th, 2010. And I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to use, and I didn't know how. I didn't know how to stop using. I knew how to use. I knew that I was desperate to change. That I had spent the last 2 years of my using wanting, I would get high and think about what I could do if I just wasn't high. I couldn't look people in the eye. I stopped being able to have a conversation. I stopped being honest a long time before that. I was so alone, At first, when I got high, when I started partying, it was exciting, I was around people, I was the life of the party, I was the one dancing on the bar, and, just generally having a good old time. But what happened is that time went on, and I didn't want to share anymore, And I was, I couldn't trust anybody because I couldn't trust myself. I wasn't trustworthy. I stole, I lied, I cheated. And I found myself alone in a room by myself with my disease. So when I got to recovery, it was a real shock for me to see people coming in and like hugging each other and saying hi. Oh, sit by me. Oh, it's so good to see you. You know, I was just so unused to any of that. And I was really jealous because that's what I wanted. And so I kept coming back, you know. And little by little, I started to believe that people weren't getting high in the bathrooms. This really does work, you know. I would pull people aside. I would hear in the meetings, you know, don't use, stay clean, you know, get a sponsor, call a sponsor, pray and go to meetings. And I would be like, okay, now I need to know what really does it. I need to know the good stuff. And I would pull somebody aside. And I'm like, so what's really the secret? And they would lean in and they would say, don't use, go to meetings, pray, get a sponsor, you know, every single thing. And little by little, I started to believe that might really be true and that might really be able to work for me, you know. I was able to accept pretty easily that I was an addict, and I jumped in with both feet. I started going to meetings right away. I was really excited about it. And my second step, I was able to, it took a little bit of work, but I was able to see some insanity. I was able to see that I did not know what was going on. I did not know what was right, but I kept doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I really became insane around speeding. I had very much a lead foot in those days. Not much has changed, but I know now that I might need some help with that. And my third step, I had a lot of fun with that one, actually. I came to this place where I found a higher power who loved me and cared for me. My higher power before that had been kind of a clockwork God that had started things in motion, but that didn't care about me, that wasn't going to talk to me, wasn't going to be here to care for me. And I talked to people. I heard people share about their higher power. I heard people share about their higher power that was different than what other people had shared. And that made me feel like maybe it was okay to have a different idea of what a higher power was. I heard people share about they didn't know if they could have a higher power, but they wanted to find out, you know. And all those things helped me a lot. And my third step, I really took that step of faith by jumping out of an airplane. I did. I'll tell you what, too. You know, I'm one of these people, I'm like, I got braggadocio, and then it comes up to it, and I'm like, oh, God. And I was singing on the way up. You all know me. I mean, you know, some of y'all know me. I'm the one that likes to sing. I'm always telling people about an area we're going to have cake. And so I get in this airplane. I'm strapped onto somebody else. We're going to dive out and go skydiving. And I'm singing on the way up. I'm making up songs. And then it came time, and I was like, what have I done? What have I done? And you know, at that point, there's nowhere to go but out the door. And we go, and I'm like freaking out. And got to the bottom, and thank goodness I landed. The ground was there to meet me. And I didn't have any words left. And it was an incredible experience for me because that's what my experience is like with my higher power. When I reach out, I might be afraid. I might not know what to say, but I'll just say something. And what the answer comes back is sometimes different, sometimes not what I expected, sometimes exactly what I was hoping for. But it leaves me with my needs fulfilled in my life in a different place than it ever was before. So I wanted to tell this story too because, you know, the story of growing up is always a story about your parents. I had two parents, like most people. But both my parents, I consider, my dad is an addict. He got into recovery when I was about 5 years old. He had left my mom, and disappeared. And he spent about 1.5 years getting clean and came back into my life and was an incredible part of my life. And I'm so grateful for that example today because I think that when I knew that I had hit some place that I couldn't go anywhere else, I had some idea that maybe there was help for me. But my mom was a different person than my dad. You know, when I was working on my 4th step, I could not truck with the word resentment. I could not even talk about it. I was so angry that I couldn't even see it. I had shut down that part of myself for so long. And when I read the very first question is, what are the resentments that you have in the flat book? I was like, nope, shut it, put it away. I talked to my sponsor. 3 months later, I talked to my sponsor, and she was like, well, there's worksheets you can try. This is different stuff, you know. And the one that worked for me was write down the things that you think about. People, places, and things that you think about. Well, I thought a lot about my mom. I thought about how she used to drop me off at home and then leave from when I was 5 years old. I thought about when I wanted to feed myself and I couldn't really reach the stove. I thought about trying to hang the clothes out on the line and having to move a chair from all down the line because I couldn't reach up that far. And I thought about the day that I fell while I was skating and heard a crack in my arm. And I told her I think I broke it. And she wouldn't take me to the hospital until 3 days later it turned purple. And I thought about those things, but I didn't really have any words for them. It wasn't until I found recovery and started talking to people about it that somebody said, that's what neglect is. That's what abuse is. I knew that I had felt alone. I knew that I had felt like I couldn't trust her. I knew that I ran drugs for her before I got clean. I was living in Georgia, and I crossed state lines to Alabama to make sure she had hers. And I knew that when I got clean, and I called her and I told her, she said, well, that's very nice. Are you still going to get some for me? And now I know that I'm not supposed to take somebody else's inventory, but for a long time I was very comfortable taking hers. I decided I'm an addict, she's one too. She needs help. I need to make sure that she gets help. I'm in charge of her recovery. And none of that worked out real well. Not much of any of that worked out real well. But what did happen is that as I worked on my 4th step, and she kept coming up again and again, surprise, and I sat there and I said, I have a feeling about this. And all these other people too, right? It wasn't like she was the only one I had resentments on. But I was able to find some way to point at those actions that happened and say, I don't like that happened. I wish that had not happened. The truth is that I lived my whole life in resentment. Every time I went over to see her, I had to gird myself up because I was angry and I couldn't tell her. And she would poke at me. She would push all my buttons. Well, she installed the buttons. Of course she did. She knew where they were. And I couldn't see that what I needed was to dismantle them. At that point, all I could see was that I needed to shelter myself. Around the time I worked my 4th step and my 5th step, I met my husband, Sean. He wasn't my husband when I met him. But, but he is now. And I worked on my 4th step and my 5th step, and that same wall I ran up against resentment, the word resentment, I ran up against character defects. I was like, character defects? I don't even know what that's all about. I wanted to call them inclusions, like on a diamond. Okay? I was the perfect diamond of recovery. I just had these little inclusions. Oh my gosh, y'all. It took a year. I would talk about spreadsheets. I would make a spreadsheet. I would figure out a new way to work my 6-step. I would highlight a bunch of things, and then I would put it away for 2 months, and then I would do it again. I would get a new system. I would highlight more things. I would turn over here, do this, do all this other stuff. And I spent that year really avoiding my 6-step. And people tell you not to sit on it for a good reason, because it's painful when it finally comes time to do it. But there is a corollary to this. I think the 6-step has another little 5.5 step. Because until I learned how to love myself well enough to say I'm not perfect, how could I have admitted those character defects? Those great big glaring errors that I can now see and point out with ease. At the time, I had no way of even putting words to them. And so I spent that year in a great relationship, which was very different than any other relationship I had been in. When I got into recovery, I was dating a married man, and I had hurt myself physically from using sex as a drug. I had degraded myself. I had crossed all of these terrible lines that I said I would never cross, and I just walked right over them. And when I got into recovery, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I had to take that suggestion of waiting a year, because not only would I relapse, but I knew I would die. And that might not be so for everybody, but I'm willing to bet it's probably true for a few number of people in here. I waited my year. I worked to the best of my ability. I had a friend who sat down and made a list with me and taught me how, what do you want? And I was like, well, he needs to be this tall. He needs to have, mega bucks and all this stuff. And he said, well, what about the real thing? And I met somebody who had been doing his own work. He had been working on his side. On our second date, I said something like, well, I'm just going to take it a day at a time, or, it's just one step at a time. And he turned to me, we met online, y'all. We didn't meet in the rooms, okay? And he turned to me and he said, I just need to ask you, have you ever been in recovery? Any kind of 12-step fellowship? I was like, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I am. Fancy you should ask. And you know what? He was in recovery too. And if that's not a God thing, I don't know what else could be. We had both been working our hardest to become the people that we wanted to be with. And so I spent that year testing that out, seeing what it's actually like to be honest, to be upright, to be forthright, to be willing to change, which is way harder when it's in a relationship than it is on paper, But I had a lot of work in recovery changing, and things worked out. But one of the things that I wasn't really working on was my step. One morning, I woke up, and I went to take a bath, and I got up. It was a really hot bath, and I got up, and I started to feel woozy, and I sat back down, and I felt a little bit better, so I started to get back up again, and then I felt like I think I might pass out or something. And so I went to step out, and he was sleeping in the other room. We were shacking up at this point, y'all. And he was sleeping in the other room, and I could have just called out. I could have just said, hey, I think I need some help. Something's going on. But I didn't do that. I said, I'll go sit down first and then tell him I needed help, but I took care of it. Well, that really didn't work for me. I passed out. I fell. I shattered my ankle spectacularly. It was like, this is your ankle? It was like this. It was like a whole different shape. And of course, then he came to help me. And I spent the next 6 months getting help from him every day. Every single day. If I had to go to the bathroom, I had to raise my hand. If I wanted to eat, he had to bring me the food. And that was what I needed to work my 6th step. That is what it took. And you know what the first one was? Overly self-reliant. That was my first defect. You know, the truth is that one of the ones that I kind of put on the list, but I hadn't really gotten a hold of yet, was anger. And I put it on the list and I worked on it, but I didn't really see it. And at that point, we were getting married. He had asked me to marry him. I was so excited, and I said yes. I kind of, and we were trying to plan the wedding, and I kept trying to include my mom, and she just was kind of like, well, whatever, you know. I asked her to come to my wedding fitting, like the dress, to find a dress, and she said, I'm not sure if I can make it. And I'm like, okay, well, I wish you could. And then she said the day before, I'm definitely going to make it. I will super be there. And then and she said, I'm going to drive up and stay with my sister, my aunt. And then she never came up to stay with my aunt. And then she said, well, I'm going to drive up there in the morning. And then it came time, and I was there, and I was waiting for her with my bridesmaids. And my aunt showed up, and my mama never did. And I called her, and she didn't take my call. And my aunt called her, and she took that call. And my aunt just handed the phone to me. What did she think she was going to do? And she said, oh, I just didn't make it, you know. And the thing about it is that if my mom was one of those folks who's like real connected, really got it going on, is, you know, always on time, always coming to be with me, you know, that might have been different. I might have said, oh no, what's going on? But because I had this context of abuse, I knew what the truth was. And the truth was that she just didn't come. She just didn't make it. And, you know, at that point, I started to really get in touch with some of that anger. I started to really feel it. Because this wasn't stuff that had happened from when I was a kid, that happened years ago, you know. This is stuff that was happening right now. And I'm like, I'm clean, I'm being good. Why isn't that enough? It started to come out sideways because I couldn't talk about it. And my husband grew up in an abusive home, and he is really triggered by anger. And so he would hear, I'd be over here huffing and puffing about something, somebody on the internet's wrong, you know, and I'd be, you know, like all these like, kind of, you know, and he'd be over there and say, oh, I'm sorry you're so upset, honey. And I'm like, I'm not upset. You know? And it was tough. It was really tough. It got to be where sometimes he had to just walk out the room, you know? And we got married, and it was exciting, and my mom came. I really thought about not inviting her. I was so mad at that point. And I realized that I didn't want, what I really wanted was to just not have to feel like that, and not feel angry and not be mad. And I thought, well, if I just act like I'm not mad, maybe I just won't be mad. I was very stubborn about it. And she continued to do things that I felt like were selfish and rude at the wedding. And of course, I don't know if anybody knows this about brides at weddings, but there's a little bit of stress involved. Every time, oh gosh, y'all, every time I was left alone, I started to cry. Oh, it was terrible. I was driving back from getting my hair done. I'm like, oh God, it's just crazy. Oh shit. But you know what? It all worked out like it always does, right? It always works out. We drove up to the wedding place, and there was my friend Karen waiting out there for me, and she was just like, hi, you know, and it just like, I just felt so good. I worked my 7th step pretty easily, and I worked my 8th step. Well, I did do my 8th step, but I was, at this point, I felt so angry that I really didn't want to put my mama on the list, because it's not like I've never done anything wrong to her, right? It's not like I'm completely blameless. I'm just, a marvelous, I'm not some Christ child like who's never done anything wrong. For goodness sake, I'm an addict. There's plenty I've done in my life. And we got married, and we did something kind of crazy pants. We sold our cars and got rid of our house and gave our cats to other people and gave away all of our stuff. And 3 days after we got married, we got on the road and we traveled. We traveled for a year. Both of us work online. And so we were, the first few weeks, it was a honeymoon. And then the second, like the rest of that year, it was not necessarily a honeymoon, but it was definitely kind of a stress test for the marriage, Like if you really want to know if you can stay together, try it for a year when the only people you know in town is you and your husband. Lord Almighty. But, I was angry, and I was so angry that I forgot my 8th step. I came time to work my 9th step, and I had left it in Atlanta, packed up in all my stuff. And I was like, oh crap, I'm supposed to take the 8th step and make the list and make the amends on the 9th step. I didn't do any of it, And I guess when I'm stressed, I turn into like a reporter. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? So I made my list from memory. And I remembered that my mom was on my list, but I couldn't remember what for. And then I started reading into the 9th step, and it said, if you have resentments against people that you owe an amends to, you need to work on the resentments first. So I was like, oh, thank goodness. I don't have to make an amends to her now, like forever. Because I had so much resentment at that point. And I was so angry. And my husband was really, he couldn't really deal with it anymore because we were the only people we knew. So if I was mad all the time, he just had to keep leaving the room, I would call my sponsor, and I went to meetings while we were on the road, which was exciting. There were some English language meetings in Paris. We went to South Africa. There were some incredible meetings in South Africa. We went to Malaysia and Thailand. There were some good meetings there. It's incredible. You can find anywhere all around the world. London, just incredible. You can find the same readings, the same color, in English, which is kind of incredible. Turkey, they don't have, they had like 2 English language meetings, and they had been thinking about shutting it down, the one that I went to, because there just wasn't that many people. 2 people would show up for the meeting, and then 2 people would show up the next week, and 2 people would show up the week after that. And then I showed up, and it was still there. And I wasn't alone. And when I talked about anger to these people at these meetings, everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. Everybody knew exactly what I was going through. Finally, I got to this point where I wanted freedom from this. And here's this line: we find freedom from drugs, from our addiction, and from our self-obsession. I didn't want to let go of my anger and my resentment, but it was fucking up my marriage. I had just gotten married, and there was this big weird thing between us. I'm mad at somebody else, so you get all the blame. And so I became willing to talk to somebody about it. And then I became willing to pray to become willing, which was a big step. For a long time, what I was praying for was the willingness to become willing. I got that. Then I prayed for the willingness to forgive. And then I realized I had no idea what forgiveness was. People talk about this in meetings, and I don't know. And I would talk to my friend Karen about it, and she would be like, you really need to work on this. I see it making this heaviness in your life. And I was like, what is the action that I'm supposed to be taking? You know, when people say work steps, what it means is get your pen, get your paper, write it down. When people say you need to forgive somebody, they're like, change your mind about how you feel. I'm like, I've never been able to do that before. Why on earth should I feel like I could do it now? But you know what people did tell me was to pray. And at first, I thought that was so much crap. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And I couldn't wrap my head around it. But you know what? There's been a lot in this program that I did not know how to do. And people told me what to do, and I put one foot in front of the other, and damned if it didn't work. So you know what? I started praying. I prayed to know what forgiveness was. And this is what I came up with. This is what somebody told me that finally stuck. Forgiveness is giving up all hope of redress for the wrongs that have been done me. And what it means is not that that something has to happen first, you know. It has nothing to do with the other person. Thank goodness, because I can't count on my mama for nothing. And it doesn't have anything to do with what has happened in the past. All it has to do with is my books and the ledger of the wrongs that have been done to me, and whether I'm willing to erase that name. Whether I'm willing to say, I don't need something from you to feel complete in myself. Whew. Well, knowing the definition was very helpful, but it did not make me forgive my mama. It did not forget. Wasn't like I heard it and I'm like, oh, now everything's great. I'm covered in rainbows. I was working my 10th step, and I catch up a little bit on my steps here. Because when I was working my 10th step is when I came to that realization of what kind of a toll it was taking on my marriage. Because I could see when I was working my 10th step every day, those little microaggressions that people talk about that can happen between people for little reasons, little things that have nothing to do with each other. And that's what the 10th step gave me. The 11th step, I think that didn't happen until after we got back. So here I was praying, and I was praying for forgiveness. I was praying to learn how to forgive. I was praying to know what forgiveness meant, and I had gotten that. I had received that. And so then I began to pray to forgive. I began to pray to forgive myself. I began to pray to forgive my mom. And little by little, I realized that I needed to add other people onto that list, and I began to pray for them. And now it's like 10 or 15 people every morning, and I pray for these people. But it's always to begin with myself, because I know that there's a lot of stuff that I've done in my past that I need to forgive myself for. Things that hurt. Things that I still struggle with, you know. We got home because my husband, we were on a lake in Thailand, 2 hours north of Bangkok, and he fell and broke his arm. And that 6 months that he had spent taking care of me, I now was able to return the favor. And I know that this is going to sound real weird, but the first like 3 or 4 days after he got hurt, maybe it was shock, but I was just walking around in this daze of gratitude. I had to go buy a bunch of pillows because we only had like one pillow each. And y'all know, if you're sick, if you're hurt, you got to put pillows on it. You need a bunch of pillows if you're going to be sick. And I went and bought all these pillows to help him sit up. He couldn't sit back with his arm like it was. And I remember carrying these pillows through the Bangkok subway and climbing all the stairs and just feeling so overwhelmed with gratitude, with the chance to give back to him what he had given to me. And, something just changed for me. I had stopped talking to my mom after my wedding. I had stopped talking to her, and her birthday went by, and I didn't call her. and her, Mother's Day went by, and I didn't call her. The holidays happened, and I didn't call her. I wrote a book about how I wanted to kill her. I really went through this weird process with all this stuff. But after we got home, I finished my 12th step, and I felt like such a badass. I was like, I'm recovered! No. The truth is I was really just back at step 1. I mean, I don't know if anybody else had that reaction, but like, I finished my 12th step, and I was so ready to start on my first step again. But Mother's Day rolled around again, and I went to send flowers to, my husband's mom, and then my stepmom. And I thought about it, and I thought, I want to send flowers to my mom. And I sent flowers to her. And you guys, I wrestled with that. I was like, I don't want to lead her on to think, I like her, I don't like her. But you know what? That's what I wanted. So that's what I did. And this last October, we had like a family reunion at my house. And she came, and her and 2 other people have birthdays in October. And I got everybody a cake. And, everybody got their own set of candles to blow out. And she came, and the last time anything like this had happened, she had opened her opening line to me was, "Oh, you look so great. Your hair's so long. Is it extensions?" and standing in front of everybody, she's like, "Are you plucking your eyebrows now?" I'm like, "What is this?" And I thought something like this might happen. She was going to come to my house, and she was going to say something hideously embarrassing. And I just said, you know what? It's going to be what it is. It is what it is. She stayed upstairs in my room, in one of our rooms, and she came, and she was just as much herself as she always is. But she didn't say anything like that to me. And it was awesome to have her there. And I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened. I was very much on my guard, and I decided that I just wasn't going to spend any time with her. I was just she's going to walk in, I'll walk out. She'll do this, I'll go over here. But you know what? It wasn't hard. It wasn't anything that I did. It just didn't hurt like it did to see her. And she called me about a month ago and told me I was at a area admin committee meeting, and I was with my friends at lunch, so I had it on Do Not Disturb. And so she called me, and I didn't answer. And then my brother called me, and I didn't get it because it was Do Not Disturb. And then my brother texted me, "You need to call Mom." And at this point, I'm like, oh God, she's in jail. I don't know what's happening. And I called her back, and she told me they found a cyst. They found a cyst on my ovary. And if you can't come, I understand. But I just wanted to tell you I'm getting surgery next week. And I said, okay. And I put down the phone, and I thought about it, and I called my sponsor, and I prayed, and I talked to my husband, and I did all the things that I know that I should do, because what I really wanted to do was go over there and help her. What I wanted to do, this daughter who had run so far, I wanted nothing more to be shed of her for so much of my life. I really wanted to be of service. And that's what I did. My stepfather is deaf. And so my being there really changed things for them. They were able to understand that, when they called over the intercom, that, I could hear, I could go, I could be of service. And, she had heard that the cyst was either the size of a grapefruit or the size of a football. And I'm like, these are the choices, grapefruit or football? You guys, it was the size of a gallon of milk. It was the size of a gallon of milk. And I was able to be there to help her get up and walk around. I was able to be there to help her take a shower and go to the bathroom. Those things that my husband had given to me, that I had given to him, I could give to her now. And I found that my anger had been replaced by love. My resentment had been replaced by acceptance. I found that instead of this fear of the future, of never reconciling with her, of never being whole again as a family, I found that I just had faith. And I thought maybe it was because she was on like anesthesia and was loopy, that she was so nice. She was so nice. And I came back a couple weeks later, and I brought some matzo ball soup like you do. And you know what? We had a great weekend together. And I don't know that it's always going to be like that, but I have faith that no matter what, it's going to be okay. I don't think that I'm done growing up. I know for sure that I'm back on my 6th step. I definitely had a lot of work to do. But I feel like the triangle, in this case at least, for this specific thing, that things have been shifted, that I don't have to go back to that place that I was at anymore. I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I'm just one human being. But recovery has given me something incredible, something I never thought I would have again. The ability to love my mom. The ability to love myself. I feel so grateful for that. This IP lays it all out, but every single thing in here is something that I learned from somebody in recovery. Every part of it is something that I heard someone share, someone talk about, someone just mention, this is what I'm working on now. This is what I'm looking at. And for that, I'm grateful to all of you for giving me back my mom. Thank you for letting me share.
And now we have Sharon.
Hi, my name is Sharon. I'm a grateful recovering addict.
Hey, Sharon.
I too want to thank the committee and GRCNA for asking me to speak and share this workshop with Risa. Start with laughter. Give me a second. Because one of the things that coming back to Columbus was the last time I was here was 20 years ago. And, I had just gotten married, and my ex was the chair of the convention. We had the honeymoon suite, whatever. And the woman who was my sponsor was the main speaker on the Saturday night convention. Fast forward 20 years. And I'm no longer married to that man. But the woman who was sponsoring me, some of you knew her, it was Casey, had passed away. Oh, and wow. So at the time I was living in Philadelphia. And the first person that I called was Leslie. Thank you. And, at the time it was just like, I just needed just somebody that I can call, and just trying to work through that. And when I think about this IP of the fear and anger and resentment, was when I was in Philadelphia, I had stopped. It was the first time in my recovery that I had stopped going to meetings. I tried it the first couple of years, and because I grew up in, I think, whether it was Georgia or South Carolina or Ohio, we had carried such unity in our meetings, and that's what I knew, and that's what I loved. And you know, it's like the city of brotherly love, and like Casey used to say, not so much. I mean, that was now I will tell you today, and I said that for many years, that was part of my story, and whew, and I am here to tell you that today I say, you know, maybe it wasn't them, it was me, of not allowing myself, of being judgmental, that it wasn't the fellowship as I knew it, and the one thing that I had always learned from Casey, it was like, if you don't like a meeting, go start a new one, you know, and create the atmosphere of recovery, and that's what all the 5th tradition is about anyway, is, you know, group conscience and what we want our meetings to look like, but to have the opportunity when I was in Philadelphia, I do not recommend this, of not going to meetings. Karen's workshop this morning on what keeps me coming back, you know, what's keeping me in recovery. And I will tell you, it's that woman's gratitude list, you know, that because I had Facebook, and granted, my husband was in recovery, but I was just mainly just focused in work, and really I was the one who was describing myself as just being hostile and angry and cynical about just life in general. I'm one of the character defects that I suffer from is just perfectionism, and if things aren't like, you know, I's dotted and T's crossed and all that stuff, I had an opinion about it. So, you know, needless to say, even though I was living with somebody in recovery, unfortunately, it was also the demise of my marriage, because, you know, the best that he could tell me was that your anger scares me, and my response was, it scares me too. Not that, no, you really need help. Either you need to get back to meetings, you need to call your sponsor, you need to work steps, do whatever. Because I hadn't. I was not working steps. That was all just more mental. I was caught up in work. And but it was a gratitude list and reading my meditations, and certainly the connection with the God of my understanding, that just for the grace of God that kept me clean through there. But I will tell you, it certainly didn't look anything like recovery. And it wasn't until it was kind of making the decision of, okay, where do we go? And you know, we had moved from Orlando. We were there for 8 years and moved to Philadelphia. And I'm thinking, okay, let's go to Orlando, because at least I don't have to start over my profession or starting over from scratch. But and his kids were in Miami, and I had my dad and my stepmom in Tampa, and mom's in Atlanta. I'm thinking that's pretty general. And the bottom line is, he didn't want to move there, and I didn't want to go to Tampa. So coming back to Atlanta, I look at, was the first time, because I really, in the course of my life, or even in my recovery, was my first husband. You know, I followed him to Columbus, Ohio, because of his profession, and supported Richard in his work. But ultimately, I wanted to come back to Atlanta. When he didn't want to move to Central Florida to be back with friends and family, I was like, let's come to Atlanta. And that was probably the best decision I have made, period, to be back where I got clean. You know, I rolled into Atlanta, and one of the things, you know, because certainly recovery is always first for me, but there are, whether it's, a place where that also nourishes me in my recovery, and part of that is, I attend a service that's spiritually based on Sunday mornings, and that has been a cornerstone for me. But it was coming back, and I remember the first thing I did was being at that service Sunday morning, but Sunday night I went to Surrender. They were like, oh, all your homies that you got clean with, they're out in the burbs. And so I went to Surrender Group in Duluth, and one of the things that Casey had always taught me, it's like, if you don't think your home group is the best home group ever, then you either go get one or make it one. And I was just really fortunate. I think I got invited to Pat's home that afternoon. There was like a football party and stuff, of learning, again, just being back home and seeing some familiar faces, but also just embracing my recovery again. Now that didn't say it's like, the anger and all that stuff didn't dissipate right away. It was the demise of the marriage, and finally, I'd been asking, how when you want to ask your significant other heart to heart, it's like, do we need to have a talk? And they're like, nope, everything's fine, until finally I was like, everything's not fine. And because I knew I wasn't, I was stressed out. And if there's one thing that I have learned in my recovery is, I didn't know how to handle stress really well. And I had neglected using the tools that I knew so well during those difficult times, and became just hostile, angry, cynical, all the crazy stuff that went with it. But so when all the truth came out, and you did with a couple of counseling sessions to try to save the marriage and all that stuff, and realized that he had already checked out, was when I look at fear, anger, and resentment, and just facing all those, not just all the general stuff in fear, but again, just kind of where I was in being that angry, hostile person, to replace it with faith, love, and acceptance. Because it takes two people to make something work. And so when the other person checks out, it's like, okay. But the good part for me was I had my family, I had a network of women and people in recovery who were here. This saved my ass. I mean, really. And on the second week of service, two of the most wonderful women that I've known in recovery came walking into Spiritual Living Center. And the cool part about that was, one, it was more validation that I am home, that I am right where I'm supposed to be. Of just learning how, I will tell you, one of the 11th step on prayer and meditation was they were offering meditation, teaching how to meditate. Now, I will tell you, I have read the Just for Today for 32 years. And the cool part about that is reading the Just for Today is that each year we read it, it's kind of remembering where I was, whether it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago or two, year before of where I was at. But just learning how to meditate. And I didn't know how. I'd never, I don't know if any of you guys have ever done the Deepak, Oprah, 21-day meditation, but it was the first time truly that I had sat still for more than 10 minutes. And
you know, we talk about the monkey mind and the chatter and all that stuff going on, but that was me learning how to sit still with all the stuff going on and to be quiet, and to replacing, you know, again, when it's fear, anger, and resentment, and replacing it with the faith and love and acceptance. And I have talked about when Risa and I were first given this, I was like, you know, in one shape, form, when I have been asked to speak, somehow it always really funnels into love and forgiveness. And I just feel like when it comes to recovery, whether it's love for myself, love for others, and forgiving ourselves. Because I don't know about you guys, but I am still my own worst critic, and God knows I can punish me so much more than whatever you guys could ever say to me. Is to replacing that with the loving stuff and affirmations. You know, I look at fear, and we had the acronym for F, everything, and run, and then there's the opposite is face everything and rise. If you know another one, please shout it out. We'll have some time left over from the meeting, but the self-centeredness or self-obsession, I remember when I got into treatment, and you know, the counselors going around, and it's like, how are you today, Sharon? I was like, fine. And he was like, no, you don't. You have fuck you written all over your forehead. And I have to remember that sometimes, you know, I still need to tell you guys what's going on with me, and that I'm hurting, that, you know, I'm not okay. It's kind of like just that emotional letting go, and to me it is the therapeutic value of one addict helping another, that I can come into these rooms, let down the walls, and everybody knows, like, I'm a laugher, but I'm really more a crier. So this was sort of a nice combination. But just the remembrance that it's like, I remember the counselor telling me that, and then I also remember that it was my dad telling me, you know, something to the effect of, you know, you think you got a silver spoon in your mouth, and like the whole world just revolves around you, and knowing today that when we get the opportunity to be of service, and since I got introduced to NA through treatment, one of the things that I love to do is, whether it's, you know, carrying a message to a facility and also to institutions. And when I was in Florida, H&I Cindy, if you ever get a chance to meet her, just give her a great big hug, in the Orlando area. And so we carried the meeting to the Seminole County Jail, and that's humbling in itself, just to, you know, be stripped down, make sure all you've got is your, you know, you even surrender your driver's license going in, and of just being able to go in and carry the message to women who have never heard of Narcotics Anonymous. Some women, what was amazing to me was that for some women, they had been in jail several times and had not heard a message of recovery. And you know, it's so great to see you here. And because, you know, he was sharing with me earlier that he, I'm not going to call you out name, but just, you know, when that we can be, you know, hearing that some people who are incarcerated who are clean, or that they get clean in jail, and having a message of recovery brought to them. my journey continues. Like Marisa said, I know God's not done with me yet. And, you know, on any given day, Sting has a song, it's like she can be all 4 seasons in one day. That I can do that, and it's really based on my spiritual condition of how I start my day. And I will tell you that I am happy to say that for these past 3 years, you know, is that YouTube is a plethora of meditation music. And so I'll turn on like meditation music, start the coffee pot, and have my meditation books. And that's how I start my day, to just get centered. And just being open to messages of recovery. That one of the things that I started doing recently was I'm going to the Buddhist temple. You know, that's what I love about NA, is that, you know, it's not about, you know, religion or anything like that, but for me, it was about a message of hearing about compassion, that to be able to really look and see others differently. And I loved how when you were sharing about, you know, our 4th, 5th, and 6th steps, that, you know, when we write our 5th step, it's also for me about writing. It's like, don't forget the assets, you know, don't forget the good stuff. And being able to share with another person and give that back. It's like I said, it's real easy for me to forgive myself, or no, other way around. Much easier for me to forgive you and not forgive myself. But is just learning about compassion and giving that back, because, you know, it's like I said, you know, whether it's age, time in recovery, is that I just want peace. You know, I just want peace. It's like everything doesn't have to be according to Sharon. Everything doesn't have to go exactly the way I want it. In fact, it's so much easier if I just let things go and, you know, let go of the how, let things unfold. That's when the miracles happen to me. And that's kind of the way it's been. Of just being loving towards myself, being loving towards you guys, and just, you know, it's kind of like reminding us of who we are. You know, I don't believe in the God is out there anymore. I believe it's in here, and I believe it's in you, and each and every one of us. And so for me, it's like the God in me sees the God in you. And for me, that's sort of how it kind of summarizes for me the triangle of self-obsession of faith, acceptance, and love, and forgiveness. And I am just so grateful to be here and sharing. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you.